Hey everybody, today we're going to work a little bit on our anatomy of a class lesson. So you've got the quiz tomorrow. Just want to make sure you guys know exactly how this works. This is going to be pretty straightforward. Remember, this is memorization. If you want to know how everything works, I'll talk about that a little bit, but you can tune it out. You really just need to know the structure of everything, and over time we'll get to where you understand why we're doing the things that we're doing. So let's get to it. Just pay attention. Memorize what I tell you. There's going to be more information here. You can always go back to it when it starts to make sense to you or when you're ready for it. So we'll start from there. Good luck on the quiz tomorrow. Here we go. We're just going to use a cart example. This will be the shopping cart example. It's pretty much the easiest one. There are a lot of options of things that we can do in here, but really the basic structure of this is going to be pretty simple, right? So in order to create a class, we're going to name it public. And then we're going to give it or tell the computer what it is that we're creating. So public, this is a class. And then we're going to name it. So in this case, it's going to be named the same name. If my computer will work, there we go. It'll be this name, the same name as the file. So cart. And then we'll have our walls. Remember that and this is a mistake that a lot of people are making here, the cart is not going to actually, or the class itself will not carry parameters. There are no parentheses after this. We're going to do that in the constructor, and we'll walk through those in just a minute. Now the error that I'm going to get here is because I included a package in this, which I didn't have to do, but I do it out of habit. So it is the example packet, and that's going to fix that problem. That line of code is absolutely not necessary. You do not need this line of code. Okay, so now we've got our class. It's really important to remember here we've got our walls, right? So we've got the curly braces that are going to define the beginning and end of our class. So that anything in here, anything in between these, is going to be a part of the cart class. So now we'll come in and we're going to have 4 components inside of this. You won't always need all of these components. Sometimes you'll need just one. But when we set this up, right now I want you always writing these 4 notes so that we know to ourselves what it is that we're doing. So I'm going to come in here and make a comment, and the first thing we're going to start with is instance variables. These are going to be the variables that are, I guess it would help if I spelled it correctly. These are going to be the variables that are inherent to the class. So a cart, a shopping cart, is going to have capacity. It might have size or discount or anything that could be associated with the idea of the shopping cart. It could have an owner, all of those things. So those are the variables that are part and parcel to any instance of the class. So whenever you create the object from the class, those are the variables that will be instantiated, will be built along with the class. Then we're going to have our constructors, and remember the constructors are where will be the places where we actually set the values for the instance variables. Then we're going to have our private methods, and then we'll have our public methods. Now it's really important that as we do this, that you remember, or try to remember, that all of our instance variables, these are attributes. So these are not going to be things that do something, they don't accomplish something. These are traits that this class will have. And then methods are going to be actions, and that's really important to remember. It's easy to sort of get confused by those two things and make the decision that to try to make methods that are actually variables. They're not things that change. So these, whenever you name attributes, these should be named as nouns, and these should be named as verbs. It's probably the only time that as an English teacher I get to actually celebrate words in here and how we structure them. So methods are going to be actions, and attributes will be nouns. So always try to structure it that way. If you're naming a method and your method is something like, color, then you know that you're not doing it right. That actually should be up under the attributes. And also, keep in mind, these should also be common nouns. You don't want things like Jack or Mark or Mom, you want them to be the generic quality, not a specific quality. So if you had a player, score would be a good instance variable, but not Mark's score or something like that. So we want to be specific about that as we sort of go forward. Okay, so let's keep working on this. Those are our basic, the basic little tenets of this. This will be the first thing that I will ask you tomorrow, or any other time that I ask you to work with classes. I am going to ask you to set this up specifically like this, that these, this will be the basic structure of the class. Okay, so if you have that down, you are going to get most of the points right for the easiest part of the quiz. So, okay, now let's look back and we'll see what else we have to add in here. We're going to add in a few of these examples so that we can see it. Now again, we're not going to actually go through and make all of the methods. We're just going to write some of them. So let's go in here and let's look and see what we can do. So instance variables, what are we going to have in here? We're going to have, let's say we're going to have capacity. So the amount of materials that could go in this. Maybe we'll have a discount. So if a user puts in the right information, or a discount code, everything in that cart is going to be discounted. And then let's say total cost. So all of the items add up together are going to total a cost here. Now if you notice, we're getting errors, and those errors are because we have not declared our the data type. So we always have to include that. So capacity is probably going to be a number. So let's call it a double. And a double is, wait for it, any number with a decimal point. So discount, that also will probably be a number, but it would be a total number. It's very rare you're going to give somebody 20.5% discount. And then total cost of the cart, that too would be a number, and probably a double. Okay, so those are the basics. We could do a lot of other things in here. Maybe we would actually have a user class declared, and so we would have user shopper equals or shopper. We could have that. We're not going to put any of that in there, but you can have a lot of other instance variables that go beyond just regular data types. Now, constructor is really important, and that is going to be part of this. Oh, let's go back also and add in our privacy here, right? Because I want you to always, not privacy, but private, right? I want you to go ahead and declare these and give them the default privacy, default to private, so that we know that nothing outside of the class can see it. Okay, our constructor is really quickly. Our constructor is going to be public. All constructors have to be public, because that's what another class calls to actually construct this. So we're going to say public. It has to be named the same as the title of the class, but this is where we have parameters. And then we're going to have those curly braces again, right? So this would be a constructor, a default constructor with no parameters passed in. Maybe we want to have a cart that is constructed, and it will already have the discount that is going to be passed in. Okay? Now, I'm not going to make a whole bunch of those, but let's talk for just a second about what is actually happening here. So if we come over and we look, and we come back here, these both are constructors. Okay? So as we look at the constructors, it's important to see some of the little details that we have here. One is that it will always be named the same as the class itself. You can have multiple ones of these. Now, the parameters that are passed in, these are basically the fingerprint, right? So it's only going to work specifically for one of these, depending on when another class calls it, if it gives it parameters or not, if it gives it a double, or if it leaves it blank. This would be the constructor called if it leaves it blank. If whatever method calls this, or whatever other class calls this, it's going to be blank. if it has a variable passed in, if it has information passed in through the parameters, and it was a double, it would call this constructor. So this gives us the option of sort of changing things around as we work on this, and we don't have to deal with all of the, we can get some information or call it in different ways. So it might be a little confusing. Don't worry about it. It's just important that you know how to duplicate those, or how to write multiple constructors with different variables in. Tomorrow I'm not going to ask you to write any of the code on the inside of these, but you are going to have to write multiple constructors. Okay, now private methods and public methods. Let's real quickly talk about that. The only difference between the two is who can see them or not. So let's say that we wanted to have let's go back and we'll start from the name. So we wanted to have a method that added an item. So we might have add item, and then it's going to have a couple things. It'll have parameters. This is where you can pass in information. And so what are two likely things that I'm going to pass in? Let's say I'm going to pass in an item's name, and I'm going to pass in the cost of that item. So in order to do that, I need to declare local variables for this particular item. So we'll go string. I'm adding the data type when I declare it. Item name, and then comma, and then the price would be probably a double. So item cost. Now, we're not going to have to write any code on the inside of this. You're just going to need to create it. But I still need to do a couple things, right, in order to make a method work. I need to add whether it's public or private, so we'll set it to private. Then I also need to add whether it or not it is, or what kind of information is going to be returned. Now, in this instance, I'm going to be adding an item. I don't really think that I need to return anything. I think that just adding the item to the cart would be enough. And there we go. That's all it takes to create a method, to add an item, or to create a method inside that. So that's a private one. And let's say we also want a public method. So public, and this one actually we're going to see or let the user know what their total cost is. So we'll call this get, as in getters and setters. So whenever you're going to get information from your class, you want to name it get. Whenever you want to set information in your class, you want to set it, or start the method name with get or set. Okay, so here we're going to get information from this. So we're going to say get total cost. We'll have our parameters, and then we have to have our walls for that method, right? So remember, the curly braces are always going to define a block of code. So get total cost. Still asking for a few things. I'm giving you a second to see if you can figure it out. Of course, I just showed you, right? So we need to know what it's going to return. Double cost, if we look up here, the total cost is a double. So that's probably what we're going to return. Double get total cost. Now again, I'm not going to make you actually write this code, but just because it would be so easy, in getters and setters, we're going to go return total cost. And that'll take the value from total cost, and it's going to, so it'll take whatever the value is here, and it's going to pass that down to this method, and then send that out to what other class called it. So maybe the main method called that to get the total cost, and it would send that information out. So if this information was $5, it would send out $5. And so now the main class, or this other class, is aware of how much the total cost is, even though that variable itself is set to private. Okay, now that's probably a lot to digest, and that is absolutely okay. So what we're going to do now is just kind of recap real quickly, and then call it a day, and you guys can be done. Okay, so if we look back, we've got several different pieces here. We have our entire class that's going to be defined: public, class, what is being built, and then the name. This is the name that you create. It is important, though, that it is named the same thing as the file that you are writing it in. These are instance variables. These are attributes that the program or that the class has. Okay, these can change, but they're qualities, they're not actions. constructors. These will build the class. And then it's important to also know that when we do this, that it can be overloaded. So this is the term overloaded. And it's important that you know that when you overload a class, you can have multiple constructors with the same name, but different parameters that are passed in. Finally, private methods, we need a couple things. We need the scope, like how much you can see of it, right? Then you need the return type. And then the name. Then you have parameters. And the parentheses, and then we close it off with our curly braces, right? So that's all we've got. This is public or private. This is the kind of data that's going to be returned, an int, a double, a different class or an object, the name that you make up, parameters that are passed into the method, and then the method itself, the actual code, but you're not going to have to write that tomorrow. Okay? And then the only difference between private and public is who can see it. And that is it, guys. That's the whole shebang. So these are the things that will be on the test or the quiz tomorrow. I hope you guys sort of get this. If you have any questions, I'm going to post this as an assignment tonight, and you can add your questions to the stream. I encourage everybody to sort of look back at the stream so that you can share information with one another. Okay? So I hope that works for all of you guys. Again, if you have any questions, let me know.